Thank you for tuning in to Stampscaping 101. This is a really fun experiment that I tried this afternoon. This is, if you notice something about this card, it is not glossy. Well, it is glossy cardstock, but I used the matte side. I was just lazy and I didn't feel like cutting down some of my probably nicer matte paper. But this is an experiment of using matte paper, but I also wanted to do this in multimedia. Oh, I forgot to use some colored pencil in here as well, which I could have done. But for the most part, this was just stamping something out. I don't even know if this colored pencil will apply to here. But stamping it out using some alcohol-based pens, you know, in terms of coloring the scene, and then using a lot of the gel pen colors, okay, to color in and kind of fully define some of the forms within a given field of images and hue to make things look a little bit more dimensional, okay? Now the thing about the gel pens and having a big range of gel pens in terms of different colors is that they're more like using some kind of paint on a scene, so you can really build out lighter colors on top of darker colors, okay? When you're working the dye bastings, they're all transparent, but working with gel pens, they're a little bit more translucent to opaque. So I'm able to, I think I was able to kind of build out some the imagery as a foundation of darker tones and then progressively working lighter. Okay, if you want to see what that means, watch the video, but it's basically like putting down some yellows and greens in here and building up gel pen marks with lighter shades of yellow, lighter shades of green over the top of darker ones, and then eventually getting to white in terms of things like the tree trunks in here, okay? And I think that's what really brought it to life. I mean, I don't know, there's just a lot of things that I learned on this scene. Applying kind of these streaks of color in the water onto, it's a very absorbent surface because it's matte and it's not coated and glossy, so you know, it was really grabbing the color off of my stylus tool tip very quickly. But the thing, how you kind of compensate for that is just get a lot more ink in your tip. Hopefully if you have any kind of re-inking fluid, in this case it was a blue, but if you don't have that, as I mentioned in the thing, maybe putting a little bit of water in here, okay, and start to apply it onto your scene, okay, so you don't get these heavy-handed marks, you know, in the shape of the sponge applicator. But anyway, this was a lot of fun here, and I learned a lot, and that's, for me, that's not always what it's about. It's about doing some scenes, some cool-looking scenes sometimes in a given media, but, you know, when you do break out and do experiment around, a lot of times you'll come up with new looks, applications, and techniques than what you would normally maybe not do from sticking with the same applications and media that you've used in the past. So a lot more experimentation to come, but this scene right here, this image of the Autumn Brook, to me looks different than anything that I've ever done with it before. So in the spirit of exploration and experimentation, it was really quite fun and eye-opening. Really quite an easy composition here. We're talking about 3 designs here, so I don't know, just a lot of fun to do. If you choose to watch this video, I hope you enjoy it. And if you have any questions, as always, drop us a note in the comments section. Or if you want to see any of the media that was used in here, I don't list specific colors, but just click on the Show More button underneath this video, okay? Alright, thanks for tuning in again. Okay, today, in the spirit of experimentation, I thought I would try the the matte side of my glossy cardstock, just to use a nice smooth piece of matte paper. It might be a little bit more stiff than some matte papers out there that you might have, but I don't know, I figured the quality of this paper, it's a coated paper, but just not glossy coated on this side, might be pretty decent, so I don't know, I was kind of being lazy too, and I just don't feel like going over and cutting a bunch of new papers, so I'm using some of my glossy cardstock that I already have trimmed down to quarter pages. I'm going to use the Autumn Brook here, and what I'm going to do is I want to try a little bit of a combination of some permanent markers, the alcohol markers, and some colored pencils maybe, and some of my gel pens here. So not quite sure about you know, what that combination will look like, how this paper will work, or anything, but you know, it never hurts to try, and a lot of times in this process, you know, you'll kind of find things that that work and don't work, so kind of always fun to kind of play around with that type of dynamic. I don't necessarily need everything to be, you know, kind of a stunning, you know, or if it ever does, kind of a success, you know, in terms of the final result. But it is good to kind of play around with different media, you know, that you might have, and maybe to use it in a different way. Okay, now I inked this up all in black. And I'm just going around here and using some of this dark green pen, and I'm just kind of changing the color, oscillating the color a little bit. Well, I don't know if I'm really oscillating the color, but maybe it's more accenting some of that black. So hopefully we'll have a little bit of variation within this impression, where it's not all kind of a flat monochromatic black here. Hopefully we get a little bit of variation of some dark green. I don't want it real light green or anything like that in some of these areas. Well, if I did, I would just add some highlights like that. Actually, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. Let's try some of this. This looks like somewhat like an olive, I guess. This one is just the number 4 green. Okay. So, if you have some, not everyone has dye-based markers these days. It used to be everyone had some Tombos or La Plumes, you know, the double-sided dye-based pens, but those were really good for kind of adding color, it seems like. If you're kind of a newer stamper, you might have more of the alcohol-based pens, you know, if you do have some pens. But these ones were good for kind of adding some color to the stamps to get a multi-tone and hue impression, as opposed to, say, coloring something up and then coloring it in with, you know, kind of your alcohol marker types of applications. Okay, now let's see. Boy, it's been a while, I think, since I've done something on a matte cardstock using multi-tone inks for a multi-tone impression, but let's see how this goes. I usually used a different paper for this, but let me see what this looks like. It'll look flatter. I'm expecting it to look more flat than glossy cardstock, because glossy cardstock just takes the ink differently on the surface, so this one, you know, any kind of matte cardstock is going to be a little bit more absorbent. Not so much so if it's like a coated stock, but just not glossy. Okay. Interesting. The black looks a little bit more gray, and the other inks look darker. So, darker greens than the black, I think. This black's a little bit dry too, so I'll keep that in mind. Now I'm going to merge, let me see something here. I was going to put this right here, but looking at this, maybe not. No, actually, while I'm doing this, I'm going to use this right here. I haven't done this before, but that will merge in beautifully with that. Let me try something here. Alright, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this piece right here. No, wait, this piece right here. Okay, but I don't want this piece down here. Because, see, this will blend in really nicely with that bank right there. I never really noticed that before. But, I don't know. Perhaps it's that spirit of exploration. Maybe we approach things with a little bit more of an open mind, which is important, especially if you're using an image that's really familiar to you and you've kind of gotten to use it in a certain way. I don't know, maybe we kind of look at things a little bit differently. Kind of if you think of it, something you're doing as an experiment, as opposed to kind of having something in mind as far as your final piece is concerned, but I don't know. There is a little bit of that variation of this green in here. Right back in here. Okay. Now it's right in here, so I'm going to overlap this about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch. Maybe it's closer to 1/4 inch. Okay, now I really cleaned this up, hopefully, with a wet paper towel to remove off the ink that remained from the first impression, okay? Alright, so that continued that little bank there. Okay, so that is our foundation, easy enough. I'll add in some other things like this in the foreground later, but let's kind of play around with a little bit of colors, okay? Alright, now, this is kind of your fall type of color scheme, and I'm not practiced at this effect of what I'm going after. In fact, I don't know what it's going to look like at all, so I'm thinking about this being kind of a green color scheme, and maybe the trees are not turning quite so much yet, but maybe they're just starting to show a hint of some color. So maybe you see these leaves are starting to turn from green. Maybe I'll sneak a little bit of red in there, or orange too, but you just kind of pick out a general color scheme like this. And apparently I need to get some more alcohol markers, because I don't have too many really light tones and kind of an orangish color scheme. So we'll go with something like this. But the gel pens, you know, are here too. So let's try to see, let's see what we can do here as far as just some coloring goes. Right now, these alcohol markers are not double-sided, but they are kind of that brush tip, okay? So just kind of filling in. I have some negative space trees in these designs here. So that there's some open area for you to color. Normally I'd be adding this with a kind of a gel pen, a sponge application. By the way, this is kind of more of a slightly yellow-green. adding that in. We'll see how this goes. There might be, I don't know, there might be a little bit of sponging in the card, so to speak, for this scene. The water down here needs to be addressed somehow. I don't know if I want to just color it in completely, but we'll see. Okay, I think I used these two so far. Let's add a little bit. Yeah, let's go with some more of this one. Just kind of more of a neutral yellow. And I'll provide that as kind of a base for these trees. And that will be my kind of base layer. Okay, it's starting to kind of fill it out, I would say. There's probably some kind of better technique for it than I'm doing, but what that would be, I don't know, because I haven't really researched it or anything, so I'm just kind of playing around. Now what I'm doing is I'm kind of reiterating what's going on up in the trees here, down in the reflections. Okay. All right. I'm finding these Le Plumes. I wish this kind of snapped on here a little bit tighter. Just kind of falls right off. Okay. Let's add a little bit of hue in terms of a hue change. Okay. This one's a little bit of an orange, so let's say some of these trees are a kind of a different variety. Maybe there's a little bit of orange to them. I don't know where this would be in the world. It could be anywhere, but I was getting to this observation. I really liked, you know, when we think of fall colors, we think of trees, you know, understandably so. But when I was in Maine one time during the, I think they call it full color. You know, it's fall color, but it's full color when everything's kind of at its peak. And I loved all the trees and everything like that. That gets your attention first. But when I was doing all these hikes all over Acadia National Park, it was all the little bushes and things like that. I don't think they were saplings of trees. I think they were just bushes too. The little bushes and little plants all over the ground, like ground cover, were, you know, turning as well in terms of the color. So, you know, if you look kind of in the details of a landscape, you know, there's all kinds of exciting things to look at in there as well. Okay, so we have some different colors working in there now. Now it looks kind of flat because it is flat. It's in terms of the applications of colors in here. So that's where I'm hoping that some of the gel pens will start to kind of bring this out. So I'm working on kind of, this is a foundation in here. Alright, now let me go around on some of this shoreline, the sand here. Okay, where it kind of meets the water. I'll give it a little bit of a brownish tinge to it. This is like a, what is this? Sunlight yellow, but I don't know, to me it's a little tan. ish. This one's a biscuit, okay? Ooh, that was really light. It's probably not going to work at all. So you just kind of work incrementally darker it. That's what I do, at least. Alright, and kind of just go in here and color. It's kind of like a coloring book here in terms of the spirit of this, in a way, and that I'm just kind of going in and coloring certain elements. But I'm doing that with keeping in mind some other applications of media to come. The gel pens are going to be opaque, and they'll sit over the top of this, so I figure I can kind of do these vast swatches of, kind of base layer colors here. I don't know how it's going to turn out. It might turn out awful, but I won't know that until I do it, so. Okay, now, the water. I don't want, what I think, I feel that if I just kind of go in here with, all pen work in here. Now, if you have like a Copic markers with that airbrush system, it would work really good in here to give it kind of a different texture. But this is going to be fairly heavy in terms of the applications of color and media. So what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to try this. It's going to be really absorbent, but let's give it a try. Some dye-based inks with a sponge application, and let's see if we can get, I don't know, this might end up being kind of a base layer as well, but I don't know. Let's see if I can get this on here with some reasonable finesse. And I say that because, I don't know. This paper is going to be so absorbent in terms of just soaking in the ink. It's hard for me to get a swatch, swipe across it, because it is just so absorbent. It's like taking all of my ink instantly. It looks like it can get a little bit of a, kind of a streak in terms of an application here, but let me try something else here. That's going to take forever, and it's going to be a little bit kind of clunky as a process here, but alright, I need to go and get my re-inker. I need some re-inker fluid, so I need this to be a lot wetter with additional ink, so I'm going to go get a re-inker fluid for one of my ink pads, and I'm going to go with a much more juicy tip here. Okay, I have an ocean aqua here. If you have any kind of really light blue, like a Marvy Salvia or a Distress ink, I forget the name of that blue. Tumbled Glass, I think. Something like that, that would be good here. Or, if you don't have, kind of a re-inker for a really light blue like that, like a really light value, you can probably take a darker value, like a medium value, and just dilute it, okay? Now, if you don't have that, you can go with your pad, ink it up, and maybe absorb a little water into it, so it's a more diluted, lighter version of something. Alright, now, I don't know if this is going to work either, so it might be too juicy, and it might leave a kind of a, awful looking streak in there, so let's just take it nice and slow. Okay. I'm going with a really light touch, or trying to. Okay. It kind of has somewhat of a watercolor-ish effect when it's really wet. And I feel like it's it's changing kind of the feel, you know, the drier this gets on me. Okay. There's somewhat of a semi kind of spontaneous type of application feel to this. Okay, let me do the same thing up in the sky. It's really weird doing this on matte paper, you know, something kind of, you know, quite absorbent. Okay, it takes the feel, the touch is slightly different. It's not hard, but see how I'm doing this the same way that I do on glossy. I'm just kind of starting on the outside, and it's just a really light touch, okay? Now this, I feel, you know, when I'm pressing it a little bit more ink is coming out. So it's a lot more apparent on this matte stock than it is glossy, because glossy, the ink kind of sits on the surface, but here it, you know, it gives me that real definitive mark, you know, so you can kind of take advantage of that in terms of doing a, you know, somewhat of a technique with it, but you know, it's just a matter of kind of getting the feel for it. Certainly don't rush it. Unless you're a watercolorist or something like that, you know, with a lot of, you know, experience doing that, then you're completely used to it, but me, I'm not. Alright, bringing this into the image a little bit more. Alright, so there we go. It's kind of interesting in terms of a technique and look, I guess. I don't know. For me, it's just kind of different. Alright, Memento Bahama Blue. It's kind of a medium tone. Let's work a little bit of the value as well in terms of hue. Okay, see that little bit darker area? Doesn't that look nicer than just the one tone of blue, right? I'm using the same tip right here. So this gives us kind of a little bit of a range of values. Okay, building up my shadows a touch. Working on this matte paper, it's kind of grabbing my tip here a little bit, so I feel I'm getting these little kind of foam crumbs coming off, and I believe it's because it's the matte paper, but I'm willing to sacrifice, you know, a little tiny bit, or bits of my stylus tool tip for the sake of this scene. It's not destroying it or anything. I'm just going on with a really light touch. I have a feeling it's kind of where the paper, the edge of the paper, where I'm kind of touching the edge of the paper first. That edge there might be kind of taking a little bite out of my applicator, but I'm not sure. But you can see what I'm talking about, though. You know, kind of going for this kind of softer look, you know, is kind of a nice contrast against the trees up there. The trees and everything like that, to me, are floating a little bit, so I'm going to do what I normally do. I'm kind of adding some shadows to it and anchoring it down into the scene. When you add shadows like that, it introduces kind of this idea of opacity and kind of visual weight to the objects. A little bit of extra tones in the four corners. Okay. Four corners, darker corners will kind of contain the scene a little bit more than it is without it, and it'll serve to frame the scene off nicely. Now, if you notice, I haven't really been using Marvy pads in this one. Marvy pads are going to be a little bit thinner and more absorbent, so when I'm working on the matte paper, I want a thicker ink. In theory, I don't know. I could probably use the Marvies, but maybe, you know, the thicker inks are better for a much more absorbent paper. Where on glossy, I like to use a combination of both, okay? Now this is going into kind of more of a navy blue. It's the Danube blue. Okay, it's giving me a nice strong shadow. At this point in time, I'm kind of using the edge of this applicator tip, stylus tool tip, okay? Now these instructional videos are not sales pitches for anything, but a lot of times people ask me in the comment section, or if they've come across one of these videos first, they ask where you can get this tool that I'm working with in so many of my videos, and you can find them all over the place out there. You know, maybe your local stamp store, if you have one around still, but we also have them on our website. Stampscapes website under accessories. In fact, it's really the only accessory that I really carry these days. The things that I tend to carry are the things that are, in the past, have been things that aren't quite as common, and so I just started carrying them because a lot of people were asking me about them and they couldn't find them, so we just started carrying them. Alright, this is working out a lot easier, better than I thought it would on a non-glossy cardstock. And it's really that foundation. I'm finding the application of this ink on here is easy because the page is becoming somewhat, you know, it's somewhat damp, you know, with the inks that I've laid down here. Now, see how I keep kind of starting on the outside edge and working my way in? I'm not doing this type of technique on here. So, yeah, the page is, I don't know, the paper's probably starting to be somewhat, I don't know if it's super saturated with ink, but definitely saturated. Okay, now, where this image is kind of still floating for me, I need to anchor it down a little bit more with the use of shadows within the design itself, I think. So I'm starting to introduce more of these blues that I'm working in into the scene, okay? Now, I'm still going to try and figure out what to do with the gel pens, but I just want to see what I can do about kind of incorporating the imagery in with its surrounding space here, this kind of negative space in here in terms of the water and sky, and the Autumn Brook is still, it doesn't, they're not really connected, although it's getting closer though. Let me try something. Let me go on with the black ink. Alright. Now at this point in time, I wish I had, well, let's see, do I have anything else? I use Marby black all the time, so I don't think I have I don't have any other black pads. I have the Versafine, but I don't want to use that pigment ink. Well, let's just try this one right here. Alright, go in with the black. Yeah, okay, not too bad. Seems fine. If you go with the same color in kind of a toning process as the darkest object on your scene, it will serve to kind of incorporate the different imagery. In this case, it's the same imagery, but it'll incorporate the imagery in not only with other sibling designs, or in this case, its own self, just applies like that. Kind of tone and shadow through both of those like that, and that helps to kind of blend them together a little bit more. Alright, now underneath these trees we have some kind of grasses, and they're all really light right now, but so I'm going to add some shadows down there underneath them with a little bit of tone as well. Okay. Alright, alright. Anchor down a little bit more here and here, and that transitions out. Okay, it's not just stark black and then light. It's kind of a little bit darker and then it transitions down here. Same thing right here. So it's darker right next to the object and lighter. So I'm doing that a little bit more and more. Now this will only get so dark, I'm thinking, okay, because the paper is absorbent, and inks on non-glossy cardstock are not going to be kind of hovering or floating on the surface as much. You know, they're going to get absorbed, so I expect it to be, you know, my black tones to be not quite so black. They're going to be some kind of form of, you know, some grayscale of the that incarnation of value. In other words, blacks will probably be like 90% gray, although it's getting pretty dark right there the more I add. I'm just not quite sure if it's going to remain that way after it dries, but we'll see. Okay, it's really blending out pretty well. Alright, so I mean this really changed the spirit. I mean this imagery looked really weird on a white piece of paper, right? Let's see, let's go with the four corners, you know, the bottom left and right corner. A little bit of hue. Well, not hue, but value. Okay. Kind of anchors down the bottom of the page, right? Even if it's just that little bit. Alright. Let's take a look in here and start to address some of these trees in terms of, and make use of some different pens that we can use in their opaque incarnations. Okay, these are gel pens right here. And I've been playing around with them recently, and I have that unboxing video. And here they are. So this will be, you know, the set that I'm choosing from in terms of colors. So I'll stick with the same colors that are kind of in here, and we'll start to apply some kind of opaque marks. Okay. Okay, let's see what we have here. Now, just in general, I don't know how effective darker colors are going to be on here. I could go darker colors in the really dark areas to kind of build them out a little bit from the back forward, if that makes sense. So we're sitting at kind of a darker field, and I'm thinking about, and just in theory, about building another color over the top of it in a lighter tone, and then on the top of that it'll be lighter. I don't know if I'll go like 4 layers. I don't know how this is going to work, but let's just see. I mean, I don't know if this is even going to show up at all, but you know, this one's or glitter pen. I'm going to go for, there's three or four different types of pens in this set. So it's tough to get this back in here sometimes. There we go. One of them is, I don't know what they call these, fluorescent maybe? Maybe these ones aren't. These look really similar. No, that one's a glitter one again. But, what I'm looking for, these ones will be good right here, I think. But we'll start off with these ones right here. And I'll just kind of, I don't want to pull them all out right here, but that's my general concept here. I'm going to look at the colors that are kind of similar to the colors that I've used down here. And I'm going to use each one of these colors over the top of a color that's in the same hue, but maybe a darker value. And I'll build up the values from dark to light. Let's just see how this works. Now, I'm kind of adding it. Not that any of these videos are like you know, dynamic viewing material, but I hope that we'll be able to see even what I'm doing down here. Alright, this is looking really good, I think. To me, it looks like it's working. I love having this range of hue. I'm going to try to get down here, and this is one of those things, maybe, well, the live videos, I lose resolution, so I don't know how that looks. But anyway, see, I'm going into these areas where there's kind of a darker green, and I'm putting this lighter green kind of over the top of it. Not over the whole thing, but kind of on the top portions of it. I'm just kind of scumbling. It's not real apparent here, but can you see that right in there? That's what that's... Yeah. Okay, that's as low as this tripod's going to go, so hopefully you can kind of tell what's going on a little bit. So this would be kind of like my highlighting exercise, except I'm doing it with green, you know, colored pen instead. And I'm adding it in some areas that are just a little bit darker than this color, okay? Now I have to keep in mind that I can add colors over the top of it, so if I go a little bit overboard with this and I don't get what I want, I can just put some... The beauty of this is I could put some gel pen marks over it, but see how that's kind of bringing those areas to life a little bit? Colors can, or objects can start to be a little bit flat, but it's really kind of surprising at what a few little highlights can do. In this case, it's color, so like I said, I kind of have to approach this with a little bit of a different spirit than what I often do. in terms of highlighting. I have to think about this in terms of coloring, so like I said, I haven't really done that before because I just didn't have a gigantic range of values within a given hue, so I don't know. Well, let's see where this goes. All right, but those little colors in here, I think you can tell what's happening in here. See all those little tones like that? It's something that, as a foundation, you can't really get with just ink work alone. Now, I added, those alcohol-based markers in here. I mean, you could do this with dye-based inks as well. It doesn't have to be the alcohol inks in here that were used. You can use them both. You maybe can use some alcohol markers and dye-based markers to color in your objects. And I mean, people do and did. So it's a lot of multimedia here. Okay. Now, this one is an even lighter value of green. So, see this right here where I go with some of that darker green, although it was the lighter green at the time. Now I'll put some of this over the top of that green, okay? Maybe not obscuring all of it, okay, but just adding it, where that green that I just used was kind of the highlight. Now this is really the highlight because it's lighter than that other one. Okay. And I think I mentioned it before in my previous video. I'm finding that these pens are a little bit more translucent than I would have thought. Okay, translucent means that they're only semi-opaque. Okay, opaque means you can't really see like anything through it. All right, so that little bit of translucency doesn't hurt unless you really want something very light and it's just not getting as light as you want. Now remember, we still have the ability to move up into our lighter values from here. So it's kind of rounding those forms out a little bit. Oh, here we go. See, like back in there, there's little spots of green, and then there's this lighter green right on the top side of it, like that. I'll do the same thing for right in here. See those trees? They're kind of flat right now, so I think with this color I can kind of add in a little bit of tone on the top of it. It's just kind of scumbling around. You don't have to be real exact with it. It's not like this linear design that you're just filling in the whole thing. You're just kind of in the spirit of the design itself, which is tonal. You're just kind of, it looks like this, that I'm kind of doing. Little marks like that, okay? Little dots, and you can kind of fill in a little bit like that. So, in terms of application method or technique or touch, maybe touch, you don't have to be exact, you don't have to be smooth. In fact, I think it's a little bit more effective if you're not quite so smooth in terms of your touch, because the designs are tonal and they're made with dots, and you don't have to be exact. Here's some little plants in here. Maybe I'll kind of bring some of those out a little bit. Okay. Let's see this little area in here. bring it to life with a little bit of highlights. And see, because I'm working within the same general color scheme and hue, right? Maybe in value as well. Everything kind of just blends in. You don't have these kind of stark, jarring kind of little touches that you're putting in there, so you can kind of just build it out slowly. All right. It's kind of blending in there too. Let's see if I can get that. There we go. So those little plants in there, I just kind of reiterated it with a little bit of a streak in there. I didn't pull them out too much, but I can pull them out a little bit more as I go, I think. Okay, the shoreline. Let's see. Let's add a little variation to the shoreline. As I'm doing this, I'm kind of returning these pens to this case, so like I said before in another video, I don't know if they're in order or not, but I kind of want to leave, of course, the neons with the neons and the metallics with the metallics. Just kind of going in here and adding a little bit foreground, or that shoreline, not foreground. This looks a little bit too pinky. Let me see if I have more of a tan. Here's a kind of a super pale tone here. Okay, where was I? I keep getting interrupted today. I just got interrupted again. Okay, back to my trees after just getting off the phone with a tree trimmer. Looking to have a tree removed at a property. Okay, I'm building out some of this. Now, what I'm finding, this is the types of things that you have to kind of see as you're doing this, is you have to kind of figure out how something looks as you're doing it, but also you have to kind of see how something looks after it dries, because sometimes something will dry differently than how it looks when it's been applied and fresh. Now what I'm finding is that as this dries, surprisingly so, this gel pen ink becomes a little bit more translucent, so my marks aren't as obvious as how it looks when applied. So, that being said, I can kind of work with that a little bit and go a little bit more heavy-handed in terms of the application of it. So how it looks immediately so will probably not be how it looks 5 minutes from now, maybe. Okay. So I'm adding this into these trees, as you can see. I'm kind of going into some of the lighter areas. It's the same color that I'm using down here in the sand as well. Around that little slight sandy bank, shoreline, whatever. And adding that up into the trees just for a little bit of kind of visual continuity in terms of color. Okay, I'm looking for another color now. It's kind of a nice brown. What would you call that? A cocoa brown, maybe? I don't know. Adding a few little marks down here. I don't like it too much in the lighter areas, but I kind of like it. A little bit of a change in hue in the darker areas for kind of a subtle mark. This is like, okay, this is the first one. No, it's working. Okay, these are brand new pens, so I thought, okay, this is the first one that's not working, but it wasn't working because I never used it before, so it's just a matter of getting it flowing. This one to me it's kind of a golden yellow. I don't know if it's gold. It's yellow, and it's not the metallic one, but it looks more gold to me in terms of the hue. But it looks very, very thin in terms of the opacity, so I don't want some of that. Because I can't see anything on it at all. Do I want a little bit of speck of some nice orange? Maybe some of these trees are starting to turn a little bit more, so I can put a little orange in them, maybe in the darker areas. Bringing it down, bring it down to some of these little plants down here. Some background color. A tree back there. This orange looks pretty good. These little bright little specks. I don't know. It's one of the things that I like playing around with. It's like I don't know, adding these little types of things. It's I don't know. It's akin to kind of I don't know, like drawing meditation or something like that. Yeah, those bright little specks like that are kind of fun. That's a neon orange. Alright, here's red. Yeah, it looks like orange again. Just, well, no, when I put it on here it looks red, so. Bits of it here and there. I really saw some of that red in the bushes, and kind of like, I don't know, it was like almost like red lichen on rocks and things like that too. Okay. Choices. I'd never say I have too many, but when it comes to this set of gel pens, it's certainly ample, in terms of my choices that I have to go with. Putting a little bit of a highlight on some of these trees. That's kind of nice. Kind of brings out the trunks a little bit. Yeah, that's a nice little touch. I've never done that before. kind of makes them look real rounded. Alright, I'd love that. Never too old to learn something new, maybe. Even when it's a design that you've been using for, you know, quite a long time. There's always something else possible. I guess especially if you try new media. Boy, that really is effective. Alright. So it's like if you discover something new with a certain design that you can do with it, and if it looks good, it's something that you add into the technique from then on. You can always, you know, use it. It's probably something that I'll always do from now on with this stamp. See, that really brings out those trunks in there. I mean, that looks a lot better. Why didn't I do that before? It's because I'm a really slow learner, and you know, in many ways. I'm not one of those fast learners. I'm a slow learner, but once I get something down, it's pretty ingrained. But that looks a lot more dimensional. And why that's important is because when you start adding in a lot of color, man, that looks like a completely different design now. When you start adding a lot of color, like with inks and sponging and whatnot, things can look rich in terms of color, but sometimes as far as form goes, okay? Sometimes the forms of certain things can look a little bit kind of muddy, all right? With all these common colors running over everything. So little types of touches can really recover things. And it's just a little streak in there amongst a lot of different color, okay? And that really brought it around. So sometimes the most minute of marks can bring about a big change at times, as I'm reminded here. Alright. Now this white is the Shuttle Art white, and it is very translucent, okay? So as I add it down here, I know that I'll add more. And as you can see, it's not a super specific application. I'm just kind of dabbing around everywhere. Alright, now I'm going to go to from my, I don't know, whatever, 10-cent pen. I think that's how much it cost her. I think it was 13 cents. To my, I don't know what these cost, $3, the Uniball Signos. Okay, it's going to be a lot more opaque. One of these wasn't working. It was the smaller Uniball Signo, okay. I think this one's the one from Japan. It has a larger tip, so it's more of a, I think it's a 1.0. The other one was a 0.7, I believe, in terms of the thickness of it. Okay, so I'm going in and just reiterating a little bit, or a lot, some of these marks that I put on with the cheaper one. cheaper one was kind of good to get things established, though. See that? Boy, those white trunks look fantastic. Okay. It's really brought that whole area to life, don't you think? Alright, let's hit this little side area or so. Shoreline again. Bring that out a little bit. Same thing right here, down here, this little sandy bank. And why don't we add in some of these little rocks? These little rocks are on the shoreline there. It's really kind of bringing it out. But you see what I mean about building up these areas, okay, from kind of dark to light. You can kind of build it up with these gel pens here. And I did it in various values. Starting from kind of the darker tone. Starting with a base of the alcohol-based markers and the dye-based inks, brush markers, direct, color application, and the sponging of the dye-based inks. And it's kind of working better than I had hoped for, or kind of thought it would. It's almost like I feel like it's almost like a little painting. I guess we are kind of, in a way, you are kind of doing a little bit of painting with because the gel pen is more like paint than ink. It's more opaque, sits on the surface. Now, I did this on matte cardstock, but you certainly could do it on glossy. There's no reason why you can't. Okay, now, kind of reiterating some of the things that are going on above it in the reflections down in the water, like little highlights. Excuse me. Okay, I'm going to consider some things in the foreground here and add those in. Let me look and see what I have. Okay, I think I will use these two images here. This is the Oak Branch Small, and this is the Winter brush, I think it's called. All the stamps and everything used is down underneath this video in the description area. You just have to click on the show more little tab. Okay. And with these two images, what I'll do is I think I'm going to stamp them out in that VersaFine again. And these will dry just fine on matte cardstock. They also dry it on glossy cardstock. This is the VersaFine right here. So you can see. Now this area in here will get a lot darker once I spray it, but you can really tell the value, you know, in terms of light and dark of the VersaFine, you know, and what a fantastic ink that can be for Foreground if you're going for something nice and dark to stand out against that background. Alright, now this oak branch, I'm not using it in its entirety. I'm just using it kind of more as a kind of a low-line shrub like that, okay? So I'll just use it in various angles and areas of it. Okay. So that's the way this does, you know, really all the designs have been designed to use certain portions for what you want. You can certainly use it in its entirety, but hopefully you can just use it for whatever you want, as if you're kind of looking at this and dissecting it in a visual way to get what you want out of it. And that's the beauty of nature designs. You know, it's certainly not an unusual thing to just grab a little something out of an element. So they are certainly designs, but you also have to think about them in terms of, you know, just being an element as well. Okay, just kind of adding a little bit of variation to the shrub, because there's, you know, various textures and things running in the foreground, or in these areas in the midground and background. So I'm just doing the same thing here in the foreground, okay? So it just kind of, I feel that that matches kind of what's going on down in these areas a little bit more. All right. So now I could have done this in color, perhaps. Not. I don't know though. I think it has to be done kind of dark like that. If I stamped it out in green down here, maybe it was light enough where I could do that, but it really stands out now in terms of visual proximity to you by being dark. But I don't know. Maybe I could have done it, some of it in green, maybe, and in black. Huh. Now, that being said, I forgot. How soon we forget. I have these gel pens, and maybe I can just change. Oh. I don't know, is that VersaFine? I just forgot I'm not stamping on glossy cardstock, so maybe that VersaFine is dry on here already. Not really, it looks wet. But I can probably add a little bit of green to it. Yeah, actually, boy. Fun with pens, fun with gel pens. It'd be better if I kind of waited for this to dry. Alright, now you probably can't tell what I'm doing here, but I'm just adding some leaves. And in person I can see some of these, little leaves on this branch as a little hint of green. Okay. And that's adding a little bit of dimension to this foreground imagery. Just going with a kind of medium dark tone green. Okay, now let's go on with the lighter one. Sorry about the coughing, my throat is kind of getting dry. I talk more in these videos than I, do in like several days, I think. Okay, that's a little bit of a lighter green. Yeah, looks pretty good. It's not quite what I'm going after yet, though. Okay, I think we can still build on that. Let's go to the much lighter one again. Oh, that was interesting. I just grabbed those two. Those ones were the glitter varieties. Let me grab one of the pens that I used in the background. This is kind of this more neon looking green. Now that VersaFine is a little bit wet, so as I kind of draw on it, it's kind of making it so that the pen doesn't flow, so I have to do a little scribble to get it kind of reactivated. Okay, it's starting to match a little bit more. Can you see that little hint of green on some of these trees? Or, not trees, but branches. It's matching, I think, with the background a little bit more. And I can do that being that I have these pens now. Okay. Alright, let me pull out my white again, and let's see what I can do about possibly... Yeah, I'll add a little bit of a highlight on some of these branches in the foreground, just like the trees in the background have that white highlight on them. Okay, so playing around with that. You see what's going on in the bushes here. Huh, looks a little bit more dimensional. Alright, we're learning all the time here, I guess. hopefully. Not really. Learning sometime. Alright, let's go with the Uniball Signo. Alright. And we'll just kind of pull out some of the branches and such that you really want to be kind of highlighted. Okay, this one over here can certainly use a little bit of help. Alright, that really changed that foreground quite a bit, I would say. It looked flat before, but it's a little bit more dimensional now. And I think that that made for a little bit of a better pairing with what was kind of going on in the background, or what is going on in the background. Adding a little bit of specular light. Light that's brighter than white to the water, hopefully to create a little bit of a shimmer. Speaking of which, alright, let's see what we have here in terms of light blue, glitter. I don't see anything real light in this pack. Oh, here's one. Let's see what we have. Well, that's not light blue at all. Way too dark. Let me see. There's nothing terribly light that I can see. Well, this one's kind of a light blue. I can put some of that in the darker blue and it would stand out a little bit. Not too much. Alright, you probably can't, yeah, you can't see those little white dots. A little bit in here. Okay. Oh, well, maybe you can. See those little dots around in that area? Just creates a little bit of shimmer. Okay. Well, that, for me, was a really fun experiment, and I've taken a lot of things from it, or not a lot, but a couple things from it. I mean, these trees, to me, are a lot more dynamic than maybe what I've done with them in the past. I don't know, I've added highlights to the, the foliage, but I haven't really done it on these, trunks before, and that really kind of pulls them out from the background. Especially when I've added all that color in there, which, is kind of fun doing in, an autumn type of setting, certainly to add that color in there. Alright. And what do you think? Matte paper doesn't have that gloss to it, so it's going to be a little bit more flat in terms of your overall range of hue, but I don't know. We've achieved a pretty decent range of hue. And the coloring in here with different types of inks. I wasn't really quite sure what to think, and the impression itself, it was kind of flat and undynamic, but I just, you saw what I did here. I just colored over the whole thing and just slowly built it out, and it seems like you can just kind of do practically whatever you wanted to do. But for me, you know, bringing out those trunks in there kind of brought it all together, I would say. But there's a lot of dimension to this. I'm kind of shocked at the amount of dimension in here that can be achieved on matte paper. This is my glossy side, you see. So it's not even, it's probably not even a high quality matte paper as far as matte papers go. But here's the thing, you know, here the hardest part about this scene, which wasn't hard once I did it, was you know, it's just using the re-inker fluid. So it's getting enough ink into your applicator so that you can kind of spread it around. And the Memento inks and Arranger inks are all kind of thicker inks, so they spread pretty well. So it was a matter of really kind of taking the time to build that up. So don't try to go for the sky and this water type of thing if you do this scene too fast. Really build it out. So you want to kind of achieve a decent saturation with that first color of ink. So it's not just coloring. It's going over it enough to where the paper, the pulp of the paper starts to absorb and get quite saturated with that ink, which makes these darker inks that you apply over the top of it easier to spread in that nice kind of a smooth transition, okay, in terms of like doing those swipes like that. Otherwise it's going to get heavy-handed if it's kind of, the paper is real dry, and it's going to be super absorbent in terms of the speed at which it absorbs the ink, okay? So that was the big thing about that. And just, you know, if you have some gel pens, and I don't see why you wouldn't go for, you know, having a decent selection of gel pens, especially, you know, when they're as cheap as, like, I don't know, I forgot what it was like 15 cents a pen or something like that, in terms of those colors, okay? You can watch my unboxing of those videos and I talk about those pens even more. But alright, so that being said, I still needed my Uniball Signo, okay? I needed that Signo to really pop out those whites in there. Now I don't know if the, you know, that white gel pen in the set is indicative of all of them. I have a feeling a lot of those brands are made in the same factory somewhere, you know, it's just branded differently, because they all seem to look kind of similar to me when I'm looking at them online. But yeah, I need the opacity of the higher quality one, you know, to bring those things out in there. Okay, so anyways, it's just a matter of building it up. It was super easy to do. If I could do it in my first go, I'm pretty happy with these results right here. You know, when I first got those impressions done, I didn't know kind of what to think, you know, or what to expect, but it's just a matter of staying with it and building it up. I think when I started seeing these shadows coming into form, in terms of the sky and the vignette, I thought, okay, this is looking okay, but it looked kind of weird in there, you know, with just the, you know, that yellow that I colored everything with in terms of base layer. But slowly building things up, getting it real textural, and then bringing out those highlights like that was really the key. And I mean, look at that area in there. That looks pretty dimensional as far as a stamped scene and impression goes. And it's all with these, you know, cheap little gel pens for the most part. Alcohol pens, you can get those. You know, there's Copics are going to be the kind of the Rolls Royce, it seems, of the alcohol-based pens in that world. But I don't know. There's also some kind of 50-cent ones that you can find online too, in terms of sets of them. So I don't know. Take a look at that, and I don't know. There's going to have to be a lot more experimenting, I think, with this technique of multimedia on matte paper, and it was super easy to do. You know, a lot of scumbling around with colors and things like that, and just redefining with the white pens in there, in terms of some areas becoming a little bit muddy of form. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the scene. I'll remember this one for a while, I think, for more reasons than one, in terms of the experiment and what was learned from it. So always a good kind of mindset when you go into a project in terms of if you want to learn new things, see it as a kind of an experiment as opposed to a real definitive type of finish you want to a notion of a given scene. So thanks again for watching, and as always, tuning into the channel.